Olivia and welcome back to Live in Literature. I'm so happy that you guys are here to join me again for another video, and thank you so much to all the people who subscribed and decided to watch my last video. It's been such a thrill to watch all of you guys enjoy the video and to read all of your guys' comments. I've loved responding to them and I can't wait to read even more in this next video. I had no idea that I was going to get such a strong audience response for making these videos, and I'm so happy that you guys are enjoying them because it's really fun to make. So, this week, one of my dear friends commented on my YouTube video asking for a video about, I would love a reading tips for beginners, maybe some good suggestions for someone who isn't as into reading or just doesn't know where to start. And that's what I'm going to do today. So, I know that reading can seem kind of scary for those who aren't as into it, or for people who just don't know where to start. It can be hard to know what to read and what's really out there when you haven't really been able to do much discovering on your own. And so I'm going to give you guys three tips today on how to, on good reading tips for beginners and for people who are in a reading slump and just want to get back into reading. And I'm going to give you guys a couple of book suggestions of books you should pick up if you are in a reading slump or just want to get back into reading. And these books will cover a variety of genres, most of them in the fantasy section, if you know what I mean. Most will contain romance, so if you're not a romance person, do leave that in the comments. I'll start recommending things without romance. I mean, I'll be doing it begrudgingly, but I'll do it. So let's get started. My first tip that I want to give to people who are starting reading again, or people trying to get out of a reading slump, is pick things you like. If you know that you like dystopian literature, pick things in the dystopian genre. If you know that you like fantasy, pick things in the fantasy genre. I say stick to what you know until you're ready to branch out further into things that are a little bit more different. That being said, I also would recommend have an open mind. Not everything is going to be exactly like your favorite book. Trust me, I know. And so be open-minded, but also pick things in a subgenre that you are familiar with and you want to follow along with and continue reading. Tip number 2. My second tip for people trying to get out of a reading slump or also trying to start reading again would be to pick things that interest you. Pick things that you find fascinating. Pick things that you want to read about. Don't just pick up any other book off the shelf. Pick up things that you think would be interesting. If that interesting thing includes gorgeous fae men carrying you off into the wilderness as you enter an enchanted realm, well then pick the book that's about that. If you find dystopian uprisings really interesting, pick things with dystopian uprisings. Just pick things that fascinate you. And tip number 1 and 2 are kind of similar, pick the same genre, pick the same things you like. These are just things that I would normally do for myself. If I know that what I like to read is a good fantasy novel with fae princes who carry you off into the night or whatever, then I would normally pick something like that to try and jumpstart myself. But sometimes that doesn't always work. And so that's why I always say pick a plot that fascinates you as well, because sometimes I need something that's completely different than what I would normally read. And it will jumpstart my reading brain again, and I can get back into it and find things that are new and interesting that I find interesting. My third tip is that you find things that your preferred author has recommended. So I find that, at least for me, Sarah J. Maas, my favorite author, recommends a lot of the books that I like. And similar for other authors too, like V.E. Schwab, Leah Bardot, Sabaa Tahir. Do apologize if I mispronounced her name. She's wonderful. Adrienne Young. These are many of authors that I follow. And so when I'm looking for new books and I see that they've recommended that book, I will usually pick it up because I trust their review. I trust that they took the time and they know their readers well enough to know that, hey, if you liked my book, you might like this other person's book. And I wanted to give you guys one more tip that I will recommend to how to get out of a reading slump, but also how to start reading again. And that tip is to pick books that are fast-paced. I think a fast-paced book is much easier to read than something that's slow-paced. If it's a slow-paced book, it might bore you before you even get a chance to get into it. And so I recommend picking something that's a little more fast-paced. And so there's a little bonus tip for you. You're welcome. So now, like I mentioned previously in the video, I'm going to recommend books from a bunch of different genres that I would recommend for people trying to get out of a reading slump or trying to start reading again. The first book I'm going to recommend is a sci-fi book by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, and it's called Aurora Rising. I'm hoping it showed up. Yay. And Aurora Rising is a book that my dear friend Rebecca Anderson, thank you, Becca, for the recommendation, And normally I wouldn't have picked up a sci-fi book. Sci-fi is really not my thing. It's a little bit too much jargon for me, and it's always like, it's kind of like, I'm like outer space. I'm like, I don't know. It's not really my thing. I'd rather go back to the Fate, Princess in the Forest. But my dear friend Rebecca Anderson recommended this one to me when I was going through a reading slump a little while back and trying to find new things to read. And I read this one, and it is fantastic. It is outrageously funny, wildly fast-paced, and it has such great world building that's not like too complex to overwhelm your mind, but also just complex enough to make you intrigued about what's going on inside of this crazy like space world. To give you a quick plot summary, it's essentially like the Breakfast Club inside the Breakfast Club in space. Yeah. I'm gonna go with that description. It's a group of people going to do a thing. And I'll be honest, I love groups of people going to do a thing. It's my favorite. You have like the group of misfits going to do an activity in a book, and you're like, yeah, they're misfits, but they're gonna be best friends eventually, kind of thing, you know? So this book, Breakfast Club in Space, Aurora Rising by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, is one of my recommendeds for the sci-fi genre. The next book series I'm going to recommend to you is a dystopian, is part of the dystopian genre, and it's called the Selection series. Here she is. It's by Kiara Cass or Kiara Cass. I do apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. But the Selection series is a dystopian series. It's 3 books long and has 2 spin-off series about a different character in 2 separate books that are not part of the Selection series. But the Selection series is a great dystopian book for people who are fans of, I would say, like, the political and world-building aspects of the Hunger Games, but also The Bachelor would be a great way to describe this book. It's one of the first dystopians that I read after I read The Hunger Games. The Selection series is about a girl named America who is selected from one of the lowest castes in the caste system of this world to go into the castle and basically live date, kind of like The Bachelor in a sense, reality TV show date the prince.
Mind if I borrow you? Maybe arrest you? I've never had to fight for somebody's attention before.
And this might sound kind of lame at first, but it really has a lot of political intrigue, a lot of interesting romantic aspects. The reasons why I would recommend this book is because it's fast-paced, the world building is elaborate, and the characters are definitely easy to root for. And I love that about this book. And I think you'll enjoy it too. The next book I want to recommend to you is from the contemporary genre, and it is called Making Faces by Amy Harmon. And I mentioned Amy Harmon previously in my last video because I love her and she writes great books. And this book, Making Faces, is one of my all-time favorite books. It is truly a masterpiece in and of itself. It is a beautiful, heartfelt story. It makes you consider what it means to be beautiful on the inside and on the outside. And something else that I love about this book is that it talks a lot about like forgiveness of oneself, of other people, of mercy, and of not passing judgment on those people that you don't know. To give you a quick summary of the story, it is about a girl named Fern in high school who falls in love with the star athlete wrestler Ambrose Young, who ends up going off to war going off to war at the end of high school. And it's basically about their struggles together of who they were in high school and who they became years later, and how they met up and how they're coping with the realities of their life and the realities of what has happened and what has occurred in their life and the people that they've loved and the people that they've lost. And so it might sound really cheesy. It might sound like the start of a Nicholas Sparks film.
Get in the water! Get in!
But honestly, it is truly one of the best things I've ever read. And if you're looking for something that's a little bit more heartfelt, I've said this to like every person that I know, but Amy Harmon knows how to make your heart like ache. Like ache in a good way, but also ache in a way that's like painful, but painful good. She really knows how to like
dig deep
and like touch your soul with her words. And this book will touch your soul for sure. It is a beautiful book. It's fast paced, great characters, and a plot that will like suck you in from the minute that you open page 1. Now I'm going to recommend one of my all-time favorite fantasy series that I think everyone should read, and that is the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber. The Caraval series is incredible. I remember when this book came out and I thought it was so unique. It had such a unique plot. And of course, fantasy is my favorite, and so I immediately latched onto it when I saw what kind of genre it was going to be. From the minute that you open the first page, you will be captured. You will be awe-inspired by the world that she's built. It is so interesting. It's essentially like, to give you a quick my kind of review. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland meets a casino meets magic. This book series is completed and it is wonderful. So I hope you enjoy it. So next, I wanted to recommend another fantasy book, but this one is a standalone. And like for some of you who feel like series are a little bit intimidating, here's a standalone fantasy novel that I actually just read like 3 weeks ago, and it is Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young. Let me give you a quick review of this book. Essentially, it's about a girl named Aylin who's part of a clan of warriors called the Aska, and they're always fighting this other clan called the Riki. And one day while she's in battle, she sees her brother who has supposedly died 5 years ago in battle. And so the book is about basically her journey with this other clan as she's trying to save her brother. And it's really interesting. I didn't expect to be so drawn in by this kind of like Vikings, like villages fighting kind of like fantasy novel, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. This book also kind of has like a Lilo and Stitch aspect because it makes you think about like who your family is, like what's considered like Ohana, you know, like Lilo and Stitch.
What about Ohana?
And so I really enjoyed that aspect of it and the family aspect. I love when books like bring a heavy familial aspect to literature, because families are such a big part of our society and how we live as people. And so I really enjoyed that about this book. I think this is a great standalone fantasy novel for people looking for a fantasy book but not wanting it to be like everything else. The next book genre I want to recommend to you is historical fiction, and the book I've chosen is called Chains by Laurie Halse Anderson. Now, this book was written many years ago, and I remember reading it when I was 12 years old. And I was probably too young to be reading something like this because of the wording and the language, just because it's like probably pretty advanced for someone of that age. But I think any age group could read this book. This book is about an African slave trying to save her sisters during the Revolutionary War. It is a beautiful story. It is very moving, and it's part of a trilogy series called Seeds of America. Historical fictions are kind of harder to read because they're a little bit more wordy. They always require a lot more effort to like kind of understand what's going on, because the dialogue is usually like is slightly different, and the time period can be a little bit to adjust to. Whereas with the magic system, you kind of just like throw them in, you're like poof, like you're here in this new world, and it's amazing. But with historical fiction, I feel like it takes a little bit more effort to make it believable. There's a lot more things you have to add to it to give it that believability, even though it is kind of like our world. But this is a wonderful book, and I would recommend it to anyone because it's also for kind of a lower age group. I would recommend it because then it might be easier for you to jump in and read it, and that's why I recommend it. Now, the next book I'm going to recommend is also kind of a historical, but I would more label it in the Western genre, and that is called These Is My Words by Nancy E. Turner. Now, this is one of my absolute favorite books that I've ever read. It is technically a biography because it's written in a journal entry style. It's about a woman named Sarah Prine who is making her life out west on the Arizona territory, who meets a man named John Elliott. And it's kind of about like their struggles together as people and their struggles together to either make a life or fight to the death until they finally, kill each other. And I really do love a good either like slowly coming together / enemies to romance kind of moment, and they kind of have some of that animosity towards one another until, things shift. But I won't get into that unless you read the book. The book is a lot more wordy and it is a little bit harder to get into, but I think it's also for like a mature, older range of people, and that's why I'm recommending it to you guys, because I think that Chains, as lovely as it is by Laurie Halse Anderson, is for a slightly younger audience. That's why I recommend These Is My Words. Trust me, I would be recommending Where the Lost Water because, it consumes my every waking moment thinking about how amazing that book is. But I thought that I would give you another historical recommendation. I do recommend that one, but another historical recommendation is These Is My Words. And I think that's something that you guys would really enjoy if you give it a chance. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. I'm so happy that I get to keep making videos for you guys about all sorts of different things. I'm going to try to keep my posting schedule to Tuesdays and Fridays, so keep your eyes peeled for that, for when I post. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a big thumbs up down below, and leave a comment and subscribe if you want to. And thank you guys so much again for following and supporting me. I'm so grateful for all my friends and family who commented and reached out in my first video. I was so excited to see all of you guys. It truly means the world to me to know that people love what I'm putting out and are enjoying the content that I'm making. It has been such a pleasure making videos for you guys so far, and I can't wait to keep doing it. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Show's over, kids.